My name is Kim Horton Alterio. My maiden name was Horton. I currently reside in Pleasant Valley, but I was born and raised until about, most of the time, until about 30, right in Bangor, right next to the house. If you're facing what used to be Battistoni's, which is now, I don't even, Depot, I don't even know what it's called now, Red Devon, to the house to the right of that. My parents owned the house and the gray barn. And that's most from the age of 3 until adult. That's where I lived.
Were your mom and dad born and raised in Stanfordville?
Yes. Well, my dad was pretty much raised in Clinton Corners. His parents, they lived in, I think it's Hibernia Road in Clinton Corners. My mom's parents, the Carnes, her parents were Rose and Edward Carn. When they first got married, they were in the city, and then they came up, and her parents had a farm up Huns Lake Road, actually. You know, the Bray farm? Well, no, is it Bray?
Bro?
Bro farm, yes. Years and years ago, they were there. But then they moved, once they got married, on 82, do you know where, and I don't even know the name of the people that live there now, but it's the plumbing place, right? A few doors up from the carousel.
Oh.
It's a house where he's got a big sign out front, the plumbing guy.
It's Dustin Bauer's house. Yeah, I know exactly.
Dustin, yes,
Dustin,
right.
Dustin the plumber.
Right, years and years ago, my grandparents bought that and lived there, and it's so funny to see old pictures. I have a ton of old pictures I need to get to you. You see the pictures of that house when they lived there, it was as neat as a pin. There's hardly any trees around, and it's just, it looks, you drive by it now and you think, wow, things have changed over the years. The house was just so different than what it looks like now. But anyway, my grandparents were there, and then when I was born, we actually lived down on Millis Lane. O'Malley's were down there, Harrison's, Fred and, I'm trying to think of her name. Harrison's, my parents actually rented a house across the street from the Harrisons. So until I was 3, I was born in that house. Most of my siblings were raised in that house. And then when I was 3, my parents bought the house where they lived next to Battistoni's from my aunt and uncle. Alfred and I'm trying to remember her name now. Anyway, Alfred, my father's brother, had the house, and then they sold it to my parents. So we were there since I was 3. So that was like in 1958, because I was born in 55.
So that's Alfie Horton?
Alfie.
So he owned the house before you?
Years and years prior to that, my grandparents owned the house.
Right, and then
my father's parents owned the house, and then Alfie bought it from his parents, and then my parents bought it from Alfie. Yes.
Now, how did your dad get his name, his nickname?
Chubb? I'm not even sure how he got his nickname, to be honest with you. It was that from childhood. Just, I don't know. And that's certainly, nobody called him Charlie or Charles, or it was always Chubb.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's funny because his brother even had kind of a nickname in a way with the Alfie. I mean, it still was a take on his name, but
right.
It was like still it wasn't quite the same.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe because their dad's name was Charles also, so maybe instead of, maybe it was just a nickname just to differentiate between the father and son. I don't know, but.
Where did they go to school? Your dad?
Here.
He came up to this building
I have
too?
pictures of my mother and my father, their school classes, which were probably 10 kids in the class, taken in by this building, outside of this building. Yeah. Yeah.
And then from here, then they would have gone up to Seymour Smith the way.
Yeah.
Probably and graduated from up in there.
Yeah.
And then your dad, like we were saying, he bartended up at Battistonis, but then did he work?
He did a lot of different things. He was a bartender when I was a kid. I remember him being the bartender, but he had driven milk trucks. Later in life, after he gave up bartending, he actually worked for Roger Beckwith. Remember, Roger Beckwith had a bus thing, and he used to work for Roger. After the bartending and before Roger, he was actually highway superintendent here.
I was going to ask you if you worked for
Yeah.
the town highway
Yeah,
department.
yeah, he was superintendent for, I don't know, 4 years or whatever.
When he worked for the trucking, the milk, was that Stats?
I'm thinking not. I don't really remember the name, but for some reason I'm thinking it was not Stats. Yeah.
And your mom, she was a home.
She was a homemaker, but she cleaned houses for a living. She worked for Archie and Jeanette Lawson. I can remember the old stories when I was a baby because I was, of course, the youngest of 5 siblings, and I was much younger than the 5 siblings. My oldest sister, Joanne, is 15 years older than I am. Then Val came, she's 10 years. My brother Craig is 7 years, and my brother Kent is 6 years. And then when my mom was 40, here I am. So I was kind of very late in life. So my mom was doing these jobs already. And I can just remember the story she used to say when I was a real small baby and in a playpen, she would take me to Jeanette Lawson's house with her while she cleaned her house. And I would just hang out in the playpen all day. And I was a great kid. And I thought, well, maybe I made up for it. In later years, I don't know. But so she did Jeanette Lawson's. When Renshaw's lived in the Big Bullis house right in Bangor, she worked for them. She worked for Lisa Coleman up on Anson Road with the horse farm. She worked for them. So that's pretty much she was a housekeeper for those people.
All right, now your house in Bangor, when we were up doing the other program at Bangor Works, you mentioned about the ball field. So there was a ball field right outside your door?
Where the parking lot is now, there was a whole bunch of things in that big field. I can remember the Churton boys who had, not that Churton boy, but Farley and Bobby and Stevie and Mark, they had horses. And I remember them having like barrel races in that field. So they had barrels set up, a lot of horse stuff going on there. There used to be ball games over there because it was just a field, just a plain field. But the thing that's so different now is where the front of the restaurant now, where there's so many trees, you can't even see it. In my day, it was just a flat open field with a great big trench right down the, kind of like an L. It would start, and it must have been like a water drainage thing. It would start like in front of the restaurant and make an L down. But it's...
You can just unloop your hand from the wire there.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So it was much different. So yeah, I mean, we played on the fields. We played football on the field. It was a much different setup than it is now. It looks nothing the same.
And then how did you get to the dump? Because they said there was a dump even beyond that.
Right in front of our house.
So there was a road made that went along like between your house and the ball field that led to
Yes.
the dump?
Yeah. There was, my parents' house had 2 small, because their house had like an oval driveway, and then another lawn part, and then between our lawn and the big field, there was a road, and there's actually another house down there. There used to be, when I was a kid, there was such a pretty big white pillared house down there. It was like, as a kid, I would look at it and go, wow, that's like a mansion down there. I don't even know who lived in it, to be honest with you. And then it just burnt to the ground one night. It was such a big deal. I mean, this fire took it to the ground. So then after that, the land sold and they built what's up there now. So there is one house further down that road from my parents' house, but it ends there. Right kind of where, and that driveway kind of veered off to the left up the hill. But where the dump road went, it went straight, and then there used to be a gate there, a dump gate that they would open and close when the dump was open. And it went, well, I mean, we used to go down there all the time, but it's, I don't know how far, maybe half a mile down there maybe.
So that was like a regular, just like a pit where they would put all the garbage in? And
It was just a road. The road would go all the way down, and then once you got way back in the woods, it went off the sides, and you'd just go down and just throw your bags of garbage off the side of the road on both sides. And maybe in its day, maybe they had it categorized. I don't remember. I don't know if, like, I don't think we certainly didn't do recycling back
Right,
then.
right.
So I think everything
Just
just went. But then later years, when we were my siblings and I were adults, we used to go down through the back fields. We would go and actually do bottle collecting back there, because there used to be, really old glass bottles, and it's amazing what you could find down there.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
I never knew that was down there.
Oh boy, yeah, yeah. Many years. I don't know when they moved it to where it's now, but I'm guessing I was at least a teenager that whole time, when it was there. Yeah.
Okay, the Methodist Church. So, just like, what do you know about the Methodist Church?
I was born and raised in the Methodist Church. Construction-wise, I'm thinking it was built 1870s, perhaps. But then that was just the church. The back hall wasn't built at that point. I think the hall might have been built, I'm thinking in the 60s maybe. But it used to be a huge church. We had a huge congregation, and then over the years, it certainly has gone down,
Right.
like a lot of churches are now. But the Stanford Nursery School still resides in our basement. Once the hall was built, they moved in, and they've been there. Oh boy, I bet they've been there 20 years.
Yeah. And does the church still own the rectory across the road?
No, the parsonage was sold. Boy, I would bet we owned it when I was a kid, because I remember going in there a lot and doing stuff with. When I was a kid, we had a pastor called Reverend Beebe. That was like a grandfather to me. We were very close, and we were there a lot, playing in the parsonage. So I'm guessing maybe that was also sold in the 60s. I don't know if that maybe was in conjunction. Maybe we sold the parsonage and then built the hall in place of that. I don't know. But so no, we don't own that anymore.
What about the house on the corner, the one that's like right where the split is for Hunts Lake Road? That would be
McPherson's
house.
McPherson's house. Yeah. They were all kind of in the same era that us kids were. There were older kids like Deke McPherson. He was kind of older, like my brother's age, and Roddy. And there was a daughter. I don't remember the daughter's name. So they were. It's funny because Bangor had such a grouping of kids, because all the Churton boys and the McPhersons and us and the hotel, the big hotel that was torn down. There was a family in there that had 3 kids. That was Art McDonald, and they actually had 3 sets of kids, because the mother was married 3 different times. So there was Art McDonald had the young kids, David McDonald, and then that was her 3rd marriage. Her 2nd marriage was Laverne Wolfe and Bobby Wolfe. Mm-hmm. And then the oldest one, I think there were 3 boys, and Mulcahy was, and so that was a big group of kids. And then, of course, that was half of the hotel. The hotel, once it stopped, in my day, it was not a hotel. When I was around, the top 2 floors were broken out into 2 apartments. So the McDonald's had the first 2-story part, and Florence Coons had the second.
And that's Judy Germond.
That's Judy Germond and Bobby Coons, and so they had 2 kids. So there was a lot of kids in the area. So we did an awful lot of, all the kids would come, because my parents' house had a nice kind of, now you look at it when you're an adult and think, wow, that's nothing. But as a kid, they had kind of a big hill that all the kids from the neighborhood would come to our house and sleigh ride. And then we had an old apple orchard beyond my parents' house in the woods, and all of the kids would come, and everybody would build their own tree forts, and we'd have apple fights in the fall, and it was a very big hangout town. All the kids we got along very well. There was always someone around to play with. So that was, and I look at today's youth and I think, I am so glad I grew up when I grew up. You know?
Yeah.
Always outside, never in the house. So.
Who lived in, where Jan Norda lived, where Nordas lived, on the corner there?
I think her grandparents. I think she got that from her grandparents.
So like Knickerbockers?
Yes.
Knickerbocker.
Yeah.
So maybe, do you think, I wonder if that's where Austin Knickerbocker, maybe, did he grow up in that house?
He might have. He might have.
Grown up in that house.
Yes, he
That'd be
might have.
interesting to find that one out.
Yeah.
She and her mom are on my list to get in touch with.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, the whole aspect of,
Yeah.
old-
And across the street from that house, Mrs. Kirshner lived, who was the postmaster in Bangor for years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what about like, who was in the old schoolhouse up on Dual Road?
That I don't
Wonder who was living
really
up in
know
there.
that. I don't know that. But I do know my grandmother, my mom's mom, was a school teacher. And she taught at that school years and years ago. And she actually ended up marrying one of her students, which back in the day must have been, wow, you know. So my grandfather was one of her students. And I mean, she was a very young teacher, so the age difference wasn't huge. But she taught there. Yeah.
Do you know where she went off to learn to be the teacher? Because some of them went to Vassar, and then some of them went out towards Oneonta. Because I've seen some of the teaching certificates for some of the people from
Yeah.
around here.
I don't know. I never heard Vassar, so I'm thinking not Vassar, but I don't remember. No, I don't. No, my older sisters would probably know more information about that kind of stuff than I do. I don't know if they're on your list or not, but
Yeah, they are. One sister's on my list, definitely.
yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
I have to get in touch with her and Mr. Bullis, because Charlie is very interested in interviewing them.
Oh, good.
So,
Okay, I'll
yeah.
tell them that. Okay, because Joanne, like I said, is 15 years older than I am,
Right.
so the take on even the neighborhood, by the time I was old enough to be hanging out, playing with kids, she was married and gone. So I think she would know different houses in the area and like who lived where and that kind of thing.
What about like Bullis Hall? What was Bullis Hall used for when you were growing up?
Apartments.
It was the same thing.
Betty Shook was in the first one on the end, and I don't really even know. I don't know who was in the other two. I think there were maybe 3 on the top level. The bottom floor, I'm not sure what it was used for. I just remember stories in the day, my mother always saying when she grew up, that it was like used for like a theater or dance kind of place. They used to have plays in there and everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, because we heard the same thing, and I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And then what about the building that was torn down, the one where Coons lived, and
The old hotel.
The old hotel. Was the Legion ever in that?
Yes,
It
the bottom
was.
floor. The bottom.
floor.
Yeah, it was if you see old pictures of it, the very bottom floor was like was where the Legion was. And then the next 2 levels were the 2 split apartments where McDonald's were in one and Coons were in the other.
And then as far as Churton's store, I mean, obviously we know where the store is, and then up above it was like a house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was in the other portion?
Horses.
Just, is that where they stored their
When I
horses?
was there was horses in there.
So
Bobby
kids-
used to have horses in there. And there was always an apartment on the end. I think Farley and Linda, when they first got married, they lived in the end apartment right next to the post office.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in the end apartment for a lot of years. Their kids were pretty much grown there. They grew up there.
And there was a gas pump, I mean, I remember the gas pump right on the corner.
right in front of the store.
Right.
Yeah, yep. I actually worked not when Churton's owned the store. I didn't work there because I was too young. I worked in that store probably for 3 or 4 years when I was in high school, when Roger Lougheed owned it. He took it over, I think, after Churton's. And it was basically the same thing. It was a grocery store, a lot of butcher. He was a butcher, so he did a lot of meats and stuff, but it was a small little grocery store. So I was like, my sister worked there and I worked there, and we were like the cashiers and stock shelves and stuff.
Do you know the years that your dad was highway superintendent?
I'm saying I was a teenager, so I'm thinking maybe early 70s. Late 60s, early 70s would be my guess.
Did he ever like tell you, like, do you remember him going out like on, in the middle of the night, like when there was a big snowstorm?
Oh, yeah, and I mean, he always said that, because I think is highway superintendent 2-year term or 4-year term?
I think it's 2.
Maybe 2. So I don't know if he was in for 2 years or 4 years. I think the most he was in for 4 years. And he always used to say one of the years that he was superintendent, and he had pictures of this up on Layton Road. We had blizzards back then, of course, much more snow than we seem to have anymore. And he had pictures of the snow was like over the top of vehicles. And it was so hard to keep the roads clean. And his thing was, that's why I didn't win the election the second or third time, because of the big storms we had.
Oh, really?
That was his excuse. I don't know if that was the case, but yeah. So he used to say, yeah, he used to be out a lot. He was out on call a lot. Trees go down and yeah.
And he was a fireman too, wasn't he?
No.
Or no?
No.
Not a fireman?
No. Legion. He was in the Legion when they had their big, I just remember a couple big things a year, like they would always have a big, huge chicken barbecue, and they'd have a lot of functions during the year.
And would they have it like, when they did their functions, would they use like the ball field? Would they set up?
Well,
in the
no,
ball field?
actually, behind I think it's still a house back there. The hotel is down.
Right.
They demolished the house, but behind the house, there used to be this really nice 2-story barn.
It's there.
It's the house now, right? They remodeled it into a house. They actually had the barbecues like in the barn and outside the barn area, so they always used to be like back there. Yeah.
And the circus never, I was reading an article, and I don't know what year it was, but they had said that there was a circus at one point across from Churton's store. But
Not in my day.
Not here,
I don't
yeah.
remember it.
Like I said, it didn't have a date on it, but it made a reference that they had at one point had a circus in that field.
No, I don't remember that. I don't even remember. I have a lot of pictures of the train station that they moved over and made the gas station and stuff out of. But even in my day, I don't even remember that being there. In my era, the only thing that we remember because we played on it all the time was the cannon, which is still there. The cannon was a big, all the kids met at the cannon at night. That's kind of where you hung out. But I don't remember the gas station, even though I have a bunch of pictures that show that. I don't remember the train station, and I don't remember the gas station.
Yeah, because the train station they took and they moved it out to Bull's Head Road.
Okay.
And that's not there anymore.
Right, okay.
It just collapsed also.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get down to the school, to this school? Did somebody
Walk.
You walked?
Yeah. Walked. Yeah. The same with rec. I mean, that was our summer. I just remember walking to rec every day, or taking a bike to rec every day, and that's kind of, you just spent your entire summer down there. I learned to swim in rec, and it's funny, I was down there for a barbecue the other day, and I was looking around thinking, wow, it's just, the playground section wasn't there, and it was just, there was hardly even a dock at the time. It was just pretty much a mud hole, and it's just, but it was our life in the summer,
What about the library at the bottom of the hill?
Yeah. It's funny, I was just away with some girls that I went to high school with for last week, and we were talking about grade school because most of us were here, and they said, "Do you remember rolling down the hill to go to the library?" And I said, "You're absolutely right, we did. We'd roll," and I'm just looking at this hill, walking in, going, "That's quite a hill." Rolling down the hill and going to the library, and it was such a treat going. That's what they even said. We couldn't wait to get to the library to get new books. Funny.
What else did you do, like, from the school, like, as far as, like, other, like, field trip type things? Did you go?
You know, we didn't go many places no. I do remember going, like, to the Audubon place, and I don't even know where that is, to be honest with you. I just remember doing that. We didn't take a lot of field trips. We just remembered, we were all talking about here, and they said it's filled in, maybe you know, I don't know. On that side of this building, there used to be this big, huge crater.
Yep,
Is it filled in?
it is.
But that was the best thing. We all said we used to love that place because it was, we would just run up and down the hill, and we would have like field day in the backyard, and
Is there a time capsule buried up here from like the kids at school?
not that I know about. No,
Okay, I was
No.
wondering about that.
no.
I know, because there is a time capsule on the corner of the building, but that's from like the scouts and whatnot from,
Yeah.
I think, like 28 years ago or so.
Yeah, no. I still have. I brought all the grade school pictures. I have all of the class pictures from kindergarten through 6th grade, and it's interesting just to sit through and some of the kids you don't even know where they are at this point, and some of them you don't even remember being in your class.
Right.
So it's interesting. It's
Do you
interesting.
have any other stories about like growing up here that any other?
No, I mean it was a pretty calm childhood, really. I wouldn't have wanted it any different. We had a lot of kids to play with, and you just made your own fun. It's spent outside all the time, never inside. Well, back then you only had 2 channels on your television, so you didn't even think about watching TV during the day. That was a big thing at night, maybe, but that's.
Do you are there any special events in town that you like remember that impressed you in any way? Things that might have happened?
Just like the holidays that we were talking about, because a lot of us that got together, we were in band in high school, and we always used to complain because we'd have to march in the parades. So the parades, were
Like Memorial Day?
Memorial Day, and yeah,
Mm.
and Community Day. We used to do Community Day parades.
Was Community Day, was it always down at the Grange Hall back then?
I think it was. Yeah, I always remember that. Yeah,
Going there.
yeah.
Were you like in the Girl Scouts or anything like that?
I was in the Brownies for a little bit, and then wasn't my cup of tea, so I never went further with it.
Leader?
I wasn't in it very long, so I have no idea.
So,
I don't know.
what, did you join clubs like when you were in school or anything like that?
In school and
Yeah.
in high school, yeah, some.
But you didn't like join the Grange here or anything like that?
No,
No,
it was not in the Grange.
no. But the church, you were involved in
I've
the
always
church.
been involved in the church. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When, we were talking about United Church of Christ, they had the Camp Medusa that the kids used to go to. They would send kids off to that.
Okay.
Did your church have like any kind of like a camp or anything like that, or just like
Not that I ever went to. If we did, no, I don't. Not that I know of. We didn't.
Did your siblings? Did anybody ever go to the fire company camp when they used to sponsor? Well, we still do. Sponsor the kids to go to Camp de Bruce, the DEC camp.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
I'm trying to find other kids that went to this camp, because they started sending the kids from.
I didn't even know they did that.
Yeah, they've been doing it since I want to say 1950 thereabouts.
Wow.
Yeah, we've this year we sent 4. We were looking for 6 kids and we ended up with 4.
And this is the fire company that
Yeah,
does that?
we
Wow.
send the kids to the DEC camp every year.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the next is, if you talk to the girls or whoever, find out, did anybody go to Camp de Bruce?
Oh, okay.
Kathy wants to
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I'm just trying to think of what else. Oh, well, the inside of the church, that's pretty much the way it is right now. Your Methodist church.
Yeah, yeah, no, it didn't, other than adding the back.
Sunday
You know, we've painted over the years, but it's still pretty all original. It's like the pressed tin walls. It's been painted over the years. I remember growing up, it used to be like a baby blue, and now it's tan or something. But it's just, I just remember being pretty active in the church, and back in the day when, I mean, the church used to be full, and we'd have a junior choir, and we'd have a senior choir, and the church would be full, and now it's like, if we had a choir, we wouldn't have anybody in the congregation. So it's changed drastically over the years, yeah. But we used to do a lot in the church. We used to have dinners, a few dinners every year, 4 or 5 dinners, for the community, and so we still do a bit of that. We still do some of that. But.
I loved it when you rang the bells for Veterans Day. That was so.
Yeah.
It was so nice.
Yeah, yeah. It's a nice old church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. Is there anything else you want to share? Do you think of?
Not that I can think of. I don't know of anything major that happened, but it was a nice place to grow up.
Well, I got a good picture of Bangor there, like where where different people lived in Bangor. That's great, and who was there, and
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah, years when I was growing up, where not Shaw's, Karen, who lives right next to the Methodist church. Karen Quinn. That used to be Dr. Mangieri's. And prior to Dr. Mangieri, it was another doctor that my mother actually used to work for. She would, I don't know if she was taking care of his house or whatever back then. But I just remember growing up with Mangieri and having such a fear of going into his. I mean, there's stories growing up of, and I'm sure most of these are very exaggerated, of my siblings saying every time we'd go to Mangieri's, he would be chasing us around the table with a needle in his hand. And it would be like, we just kind of stayed clear of Dr. Mangieri's house. But he was, he was interesting.
Who was in the house on Millis Lane with the pond? Was that a butcher at that point growing up, or was that a private house by that time? You have Renshaw's house, then the one that where Steve and Tom live, and then the next house would be where
Cars used to live there the next one down from, the little one next to Renshaw's used to be in my era, well, maybe a little past. Murphy's used to live there, Daphne Murphy, because her son was friends with my son. And then the next one down was Cars.
Oh, is that where Larry Carr lived?
No, a different car. And then I think 2 down from that was, my sister will be real good with this. She remembers like who lived where. I think it was Bertzel's, where the butcher shop maybe is, growing up.
And it had the pond, because that was the undertaker's place too.
Okay.
Because, I don't know, they have, in that Stanford Memories, they have a story about, I think it might have been like Leon White, when they interviewed him, talked about at one point they used to float bodies in it.
Really?
Yeah.
In the pond?
In the pond, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So.
And then Mrs. Palmer, I was only 3 when we left the little area, the Millis Lane area. But Mrs. Palmer used to live in that scary old house on the corner, kind of across from the Bertzel house.
Yeah.
And my siblings have stories about Mrs. Palmer that, she would be this scary old lady. And
her granddaughter is Jane Staff, the teacher up in the high school.
Really?
Yeah, because I've been in touch with them about the Palmer house.
Oh, interesting.
And Mrs. Palmer and Mr. Palmer, they used to do plumbing and drill wells, and they would do the divining.
Oh,
And yes, Jane was telling me about Grandma and how they used to do that.
wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
In fact, she sent me a picture, I'll show you, of her grandmother on a site helping the grandfather drill a well.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow, wow.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
And then what about like right across from Palmer's house there? It would be across from Birdsall and across from Palmer's, where I think that it's a foundation now. That barn, I think, or that was actually a mill,
I think it was, you're
at
right. I
one
think it was
point.
a mill at one point.
But that was down already.
Yeah, that was, I think the structure was probably hanging in there when I was around, but not functioning at all. Maybe it was a mill that my sister would remember, but yeah, I don't.
Was there another building in back of that? Like if you went on Mill Lane and you went behind where that mill used to be or whatever that structure was, and then Listman's house is the next one? Was there another building in there somehow? On, like, if you were going in that road, it would be on your right-hand side before you got to Listman's. I don't know why I have in my head that there was a building there.
Between, you're talking about Palmer and,
Well, if you go down Millis Road and
Yeah.
then you go to where the little lane is that leads into O'Malley's.
right,
Palmer's would be on your left. The old barn mill would be on the right, the foundation of it. And then along, like on the right-hand side as you went in on the lane before you got to where the bridge and that house is there ever anything there?
I don't think so. Not that I remember. No.
Did you ever play on the trestle in there?
Some, not, my siblings did more. They had a lot of stories about being on the trestle. No, my girlfriend and I, Laverne Wolf, who lived in the old hotel, we used to walk the block every night, most of that.
Go up in there and then come.
Yeah, we'd do the block by O'Malley's and come down and go up the hill by Churton's and around. And one night, both of us were deathly afraid of bats, and we got stuck in front of, which was really stupid, in front of a street light by Birdsall's, standing there for like 2 hours because bats were swooping, and we were so afraid to leave. We just stood there. Finally, my mother came looking for us because we were just petrified sitting there because the bats were swooping. That's one memory of childhood, but yeah, it was a nice area. Harrison's actually, my mom was best friends with Alice Harrison, who lived in the house right on the corner of that. What is that road? That little road that goes off of Millis?
I guess it's Mill Lane.
Oh, it's Mill Lane.
I think it's Mill Lane.
Where all Malleys live.
Yeah.
Okay, because they live right on the corner, the big house right on the corner that Listmans live
Oh, okay.
now. And my mother and Alice used to be best friends, so I'm assuming that's why we rented the house across the street where Susan Francis, I don't know if Francises are still there, but I don't know who's
not
that.
there anymore.
Okay. We used to live in that house before the big renovation. They added a lot of stuff to it,
But you weren't down, but even later, did you skate on the pond there?
I not, because I was only 3, but I never learned how to skate. But all of my siblings, they did. I mean, they all.
It was right there.
Oh yeah, no, they all did it there. They said it was a blast.
They swim in it too?
Yep.
Swimming.
I do remember swimming. We were allowed occasionally. Harrison's house was a big, like 3-story house that went down in the back, and if you went down all the way to the bottom, you could swim like on the bottom where the falls come over. Mm-hmm. At the bottom, there was like a little pool area that we could go swimming. So I do remember swimming down there through the Harrisons. But they had Mrs. Harrison. They had Rodney's mother living with them also. So that was quite a threesome over there. She was kind of a tough nut sometimes, but it's. Yeah. So I don't remember that area that much because we moved to my parents' house by Battistoni's when I was 3, so I don't remember much of it. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome.